For most of your life, you've probably heard the same line. The United States and Canada share the world's longest undefended border. Best friends, closest allies, same values, same team. Now, a former U.S. ambassador to Canada is saying something very different. U.S.-Canada relations have hit rock bottom, the worst in modern history. So how do you go from best friend to 51st state jokes, emergency fentanyl tariffs, and talk of annexation in just a few years? Tonight on Huge Press Room, we're unpacking how Donald Trump's second term turned the Canada-US relationship from automatic friendship into open pressure, and why some people say this is the most dangerous moment for that border in generations. You're watching Huge Press Room. If you want more deep dives on Trump, Canada, and the real power games behind the headlines, hit subscribe, drop a like, and let's get into it. For decades, the story was simple. Canada was the reliable neighbor. America was the big brother. They fought in the same wars, built the same institutions, and signed a thick stack of free trade deals, from the original Canada-US FTA to NAFTA, and then the USMCA, also called CUSMA. Supply chains crossed the border like it almost wasn't there. Car parts, steel, lumber, tourists, students, all flowing back and forth. That story started cracking in Trump's first term, but it's his second term, starting in 2025, that really took a sledgehammer to it. In his inaugural address, Trump promised steep tariffs on any country he said was taking advantage of the U.S., calling out Canada and Mexico by name and accusing them of letting mass numbers of people and fentanyl into the United States. A few days later, he did something no U.S. president had ever done before. He used a national emergency law, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA, to impose across-the-board tariffs on America's neighbors. On February 1st, 2025, Trump signed orders slapping an extra 25% tariff on almost all imports from Canada and Mexico, and a 10% tariff on imports from China, with Canadian oil and some energy products facing a reduced 10% IEEPA tariff instead of 25%. He justified this by declaring that fentanyl and undocumented migration from these countries were an unusual and extraordinary threat to U.S. national security. In reality, U.S. data shows that well over 90% of fentanyl entering the U.S. comes through or from Mexico, not Canada. Canada's share is tiny by comparison. But the law doesn't care about nuance. Once the emergency is declared, the tariffs go on. For Canada, this wasn't some abstract diplomatic dispute. It meant goods that didn't qualify for USMCA duty-free status suddenly faced 25% tariffs. Non-USMCA energy and potash got hit with 10%. And later that year, the 25% rate was raised to 35% on many products. The message from Washington was brutal. We think you're a security problem, and we're going to tax you like one. On top of the tariffs came something Canadians weren't used to hearing from a U.S. president: annexation talk. Even before taking office again, Trump had started floating the idea that Canada should become the 51st U.S. state, saying the U.S. could use economic force, not tanks, to make it happen. At a Mar-a-Lago dinner, he reportedly suggested forcing Canada into the Union with 25% tariffs as leverage, complaining about trade deficits and claiming Canadians would be better off as Americans. He repeated the 51st state line again and again, sometimes as a joke, sometimes very much not. Analysts tracking his second-term foreign policy say this rhetoric about annexing Canada fits into a larger pattern of territorial ambitions and economic pressure across the Americas. Canada's reaction? Justin Trudeau, still Prime Minister at the time, went online to say there was no chance Canada would become part of the U.S., calling the idea ignorant of Canadian identity and sovereignty. His foreign minister called Trump's comments dangerous and unserious about sovereignty. Even conservative opposition leader Pierre Poilievre, no fan of Trudeau, felt forced to publicly reaffirm that Canada is not for sale. Later, Trudeau was caught on a hot mic warning other leaders that Trump's annexation talk isn't a joke and that it's tied to Canada's minerals, energy, and strategic location. When Mark Carney eventually took over as Prime Minister, Trump kept using the line, telling reporters that if Canada just became State 51, all these tariffs and disputes could go away. For many Canadians, hearing the US president repeatedly hint that their country should be economically coerced into joining the US wasn't just offensive. It was the clearest sign that the old best friends story had been ripped up. While the rhetoric got hotter, the relationship on the ground started to crack in quiet but painful ways. Tourism is one example. Trips from Canada to the US have dropped sharply. One recent Oval Office meeting acknowledged a 23% plunge in Canadian visits to the US, driven largely by anger and uncertainty over tariffs and hostile remarks. People who once went to Florida, New York, or Vegas without thinking twice now ask, why give money to a country that's treating us like criminals and free riders? What if there's a border issue on the way back? Business ties are even more fragile. Because of the IEEPA tariffs, many Canadian goods that don't fully meet USMCA rules now face 35% border duties, making them far less competitive in US markets. Former US Ambassador James Blanchard, who served in Ottawa in the 1990s, now says openly that Trump's policies have damaged both economies and left the relationship at rock bottom, worse than any time in his memory. He's not alone. Canadian commentators warn that the trust underpinning the border on security, NORAD, and NATO is being quietly corroded. US analysts point out that using Canada as a punching bag over fentanyl, when most of the drug still comes via Mexico and the Pacific, looks more like political theater than real strategy. And then there's the legal mess. Several US courts have started ruling that Trump may have overstepped his powers under IEEPA by using a national emergency to impose broad economic tariffs on allies for reasons that stretch the law. So you have a president calling Canada a security threat and potential 51st state, allies and courts questioning whether those tariffs are even legal, and ordinary people and businesses on both sides stuck with the bill. The annexation talk and tariffs are one side of the story. The other side is how Canada is responding, and how that response could lock in this rock-bottom moment for years. Faced with an unpredictable Washington, Carney has started what amounts to a quiet foreign policy revolution. A plan to double non-US exports in the next decade, a pivot toward China, India, Indonesia, Mexico, and Europe, and as you've seen in our other videos, a controversial pipeline strategy to send more Canadian oil and gas to Asia instead of the US. One Washington Post analysis recently put it bluntly. Trump's tariffs and rhetoric are pushing Canada closer to China and India as Ottawa scrambles to protect itself from American economic shocks. For decades, the basic assumption in Washington was calm, Canada's not going anywhere. They might grumble, but we're their main partner forever. Now, Canadian officials are openly talking about reducing reliance on the US, building new trade infrastructure, and treating the 2026 USMCA review as a moment when things could go very wrong. Trump, for his part, seems to see Canada as a handy example when he wants to show he's tough on trade, a supposed source of drugs and migrants when he wants to talk about security, and occasionally a future prize, the 51st state, to be pulled into the US sphere by economic pressure. That's a radical shift from the old model of quiet, boring, technocratic cooperation. And it's why people like James Blanchard are sounding the alarm. When a former ambassador says rock bottom, he doesn't mean just hurt feelings. He means trust is gone at the top level. Institutions that used to run on autopilot now need crisis management and bad surprises. On trade, border rules, military cooperation are more likely than they used to be. So where does that leave us? On paper, the US and Canada are still allies, still in NATO, still sharing NORAD, still deeply integrated on energy, defense, and supply chains. But step back and look at the bigger picture. You have a US president who slaps emergency tariffs on Canada using a drug crisis as justification, talks casually about forcing Canada to become a US state, and treats a neighbor of 38 million people as a bargaining chip in his domestic political fights. You have a Canadian government that no longer believes the US is a stable, reliable partner, is pouring energy into trade with Asia and Europe instead, and is starting to talk about the US in public more like a risk to manage than a partner to trust. And you have experts on both sides warning that this isn't a small argument, it's a historic turning point. If you're Canadian, you might be wondering, are we really just a tariff target and a punchline now? What happens in 2026 when USMCA is up for review? And if future presidents copy Trump's playbook, does that mean we're always one speech away from another economic shock? If you're American, you might ask, is it smart to push a peaceful, resource-rich neighbor toward China and India? What happens to security cooperation if Canadians stop trusting Washington? And how many more tariffs can we stack before consumers and businesses are the ones who really pay? So here's the question I'll leave you with. Is this just a bad chapter? A low point that will eventually be fixed by a new president and a new deal? Or has Trump pushed the relationship so far that the old best friends with the longest undefended border story is gone for good? Is Canada the 51st state in waiting like Trump jokes? Or is it quietly building an exit plan from America's shadow, one tariff and one insult at a time? Let me know what you think in the comments. If you want to go deeper into this story, check out our other videos here on Huge Press Room. Carney's pipeline revolt. How Canada is trying to escape Trump's tariff trap with a Pacific pipeline. The Reagan ad that made Trump terminate all trade talks. And Taco Trump. How Trump always chickens out on tariffs but still wrecks the border economy. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of Trump versus Canada. Thanks for watching Huge Press Room. I'll see you in the next one.